People who had paranormal experiences, what's your story? I've told this before on another thread. So my parents and I moved from the Midlands to Cornwall. We looked all over the county for somewhere to live when we first moved down and finally found this place in a nice quiet neighborhood attached to a small village. This bungalow wasn't well known or anything, it was just a normal place. The elderly couple who moved in when it was built in the 60s had been the only occupants. When we first arrived to view it, it was warm and seemed like a nice cozy 3-bed bungalow. The old lady who lives there was mobile and the place was well kept. She said to us she had lost her husband a few years prior. He had been working in the back garden, didn't feel too well and came back in and sat at his place at the table. He either suffered a heart attack or heart aneurysm and died right there and then at the table. After we moved in there was no signs of anything untoward for a long time. My bedroom was the couple's old bedroom. It was an L shape with the bottom of the L being the short corridor to the hallway. I had a mirror on the cell so I could see most of the mirror from the reflection when in bed. At the time I wasn't sure if this was just me, but whenever someone would come into my room or get near the doorway, the pressure or feeling in the room would change, not in a bad way but you could feel it. It's the same feeling of that age-old instinct we all have if there is someone in my personal space. This corridor was about 3 meters from the end of my bed. I'd like to point out that this feeling I had was never wrong. I could even feel it with my Xbox headphones on, sat at the end of my bed looking in another direction. People, young family members trying to sneak up on me, the dog, whatever, you could feel it. I would be in bed at night and this feeling would go off, and at the beginning there was no noise. After a few months I would hear the pitter-patter of someone walking in socks on the carpet. They would walk into the room, stop where the corridor became my room, pause for 10 to 15 seconds and then pitter-patter out. No one was there. The pitter-patter would come all the way into my room. Then one week stuff went crazy. My parents wanted to change the kitchen, so began planning to rip bits out and upgrade it from the 60s decor. I was lying in bed with the lights on listening to music with my eyes closed and I felt someone blow in my face hard, like blowing out candles. I was like, WTF? Didn't really understand what happened. Then next day my mom and I are in the lounge and we hear a massive bang and glass smash. We go in the kitchen and the glass dinner mats we have, one is smashed where the guy sat when he died. But smashed in a weird way. The surface is fine but the second layer is cracking and splintering out. More stuff happened over the next few days, for example windows opening, stuff going missing and ending up in my room. Then we ripped the kitchen out, everything stopped except the pitter-patter. Years later I met my wife and she moved in for a while. She too heard the pitter-patter some nights when we were in bed watching TV. After years of reading ghost novels, understood that the things I didn't think too much of were a paranormal presence. We never actually saw him, but every now and again in the kitchen where he died we could smell an old man garden coat smell that would come out of nowhere and disappear again. Even after 3 kitchen remodels, my parents live for grand designs. We moved out about 10 years ago, so not sure whether he is still there or not. Not necessarily paranormal, but could be. I have suffered from sleep paralysis my whole life, but when I was in college, the added stress made it much more prevalent. It typically happened when I went to bed at 3 to 4 a.m. after studying for a stressful exam, and would sleep on my back, but this time was way different. I was a freshman in college, and actually had a pretty good day. I had gone to bed at a decent time, and didn't have much to stress about as it was early in the semester. It started off in the dream I was having. I was casually walking back to my dorm, but when I got on my floor, 3rd floor, everything seemed evil. The lights flickering, it suddenly turned dark outside. It had gone from a dream to a nightmare, and I could feel it. All of the dorm room doors were open, and I was scared to peek inside. My dorm was at the very end of the hallway, so I had to go past 20+ rooms before getting to mine. The first room I looked into on my right, was disguised as a hospital room, with no one in it. They were all hospital rooms. As I was getting closer and closer to my room, the shapes of the people laying on the hospital beds were scarier and scarier. When I finally got to my room, there was no one inside, but an empty hospital bed. I was thrown on top of it, with my grandparents and parents, and for some reason, my uncle hovering over me. He was the only one that said anything. He just said goodbye name. As I was laying in the hospital bed in my dream, I couldn't move. It was sleep paralysis. I managed to move my head and see him walk out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The door slam woke me up, and there I was, laying in my dorm room bed in the same position I was in my dream. I couldn't move though. The sleep paralysis was still happening. A few seconds later, my roommate woke up as well, and asked me why I slammed the door on my way in. About 30 minutes go by, and my parents called me that my uncle had passed away 30 minutes ago. My cat Molly died about 3 months ago. She was a small black cat. Recently, Out of the corner of my eye I have been seeing a small black figure. At one point I also saw a black cat resting on her favorite rocking chair. She had a very distinct click-clack sound when she walked. One night I heard this click-clack sound followed by a cat meow. I think Molly has come back to see me. Our old house had some odd things happen. When we moved in, our then 3-year-old would wake us up because she would be belly laughing at something in her room, night after night. She always looked to the right above her closet and would just shriek and giggle with absolute glee. We learned later that a 19-year-old had overdosed in that room and died while in transport to the hospital. Another time the kids were in bed and my husband was at work. It was late, 9 to 10 p.m. and I was folding laundry in our room. I heard the front door open, close, lock engage and my husband's footsteps come down the hallway. I thought, oh, nice, he's home early. Got into the hall to greet him and nothing. He's nowhere, truck not in the driveway. It was so distinct. Another time I was in bed, sleeping while my husband was in the living room watching a movie. It was summertime so our window was cracked open slightly. I woke up because I could smell cigarette smoke, neither of us smoke. Then I heard two men speaking very softly about how to break into the house, which door to enter, the fact that someone was watching a movie in the living room so it needed to be this end of the house. I was absolutely frozen with fear. I could barely breathe and my heart was hammering out of my chest. Incrementally I reached my hand over and texted my husband, "There's men in the front yard." He tore outside and nothing. No one was there. But the next morning we found 2 cigarette butts in the flower bed under my window. I was walking out of the park with my mom, I saw the lights and I said unconsciously, "Hi ghosts." And boom, boom, boom. All lights shined up. Then, I asked, "How many of you are good?" All lights shined up. And I felt an odd sense of comfort. And before I slept in my bed, I felt a warm, transparent hug. It was a good day for me. My parents freaked out. My son has an imaginary dog called Banjo. The creepy thing is that Banjo was the name of our family dog a long time ago when I was still a preteen. We lived on a farm close to a river. One day there was a flash flood and my brother was trapped on a rocky hill with raging flooding river all around him and farm animals could be seen being swept away by the current. Our dog Banjo unfortunately jumped in the river to save my brother but got carried away by the current and we never saw him again. After 11 hours the water was safe enough for a boat to collect my brother and he was beside himself with sadness over what happened to Banjo. My brother sadly died after being hit by a car while cycling 2 years later when he was 13. I never told my son about Banjo, so I was very shocked when he began interacting with this invisible dog called Banjo. Is it just coincidence? Or is it the spirit of my long-dead brother or the spirit of the long-dead Banjo who is visiting my new family? There are going to be 2 stories to this story. 1, this was recent like somewhere around 2021 I had a big sleep. I wake up around 10 to 11 a.m. and see what appears to be an elderly person looking Amy wrapped up in a lot of scarves just looking at me from the side of my bed. I get up to try to see if I was tripping but it just vanished. Weeks later my mom tells me about how the past owner was an elderly lady. I then remembered back to what happened that one morning that gives me the chills when I think about it. Story 2, I was around the age of 9 and woke up having to piss. So I call my mom to turn the light on for me as it was like pitch black. I get up, turn my head to walk down to the bathroom and see a shadow figure the height of me and same skinny body and head shape of me standing up. It was like me but just a figure that was black like 2D, had no face, runs into my kitchen down to my lounge room. I turn to my mom and say, "Did you see that? Did you hear that?" And she replies with, "No, what was it?" I just say, "Oh, nothing." I take a piss and try to go back to sleep but I can't. I was trying to figure out what the F that was. I still can't figure out what that was. And thoughts about it? My grandfather fell from some stairs because well, he was quite old, late 80s, and suffering from dementia and bled a ton and almost died. While he was at the hospital, he started telling everyone that he's seen ghosts and spirits of his relatives that have passed on and he's no longer afraid of death. I didn't think much at the time though it flew in the face of my scientific mind. Later, I learned that he might have had a so-called near-death experience. Fast forward 2 years later, my grandfather became ill and bedridden again and we were afraid he wasn't gonna make it. I had visited him a year before but we live thousands of miles apart. I'm in the US but he's in China. One night, I had a very intense nightmare that he was desperately trying to contact me or something and the next day, I received the call that he had passed away. Although I had a feeling his days were numbered for a while, I didn't know the exact day he'd pass away and I received an advance premonition. Sure, it could have been coincidence but I guess you can say that about a lot of things.